Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started. Today we're getting into perhaps the single most vital system for anyone flying a drone commercially, aeronautical decision-making. ADM.
Yeah, it's absolutely core. It really determines if you're operating safely, legally, and, if you're going to last in this business. We've looked at, decades of aviation safety research, and the finding is just, it's relentless. Technology leaps forward, right? Autopilot, amazing sensors, backup system.
Oh, the bells and whistles.
Exactly. But still, over 80%, 80 of accidents come back to human factors, human error.
That number is just staggering. So for you listening, our mission today is clear. We want to help you replace that sort of gut feeling flying, that ad hoc approach, with a proven systematic way of making decisions. It's the same framework manned aircraft pilots have been using for, over 100 years now.
We're going deep on ADM itself, the PAVE checklist for pre-flight, and then the 3P loop, which is your constant in-flight risk management tool.
And adopting this structure, this professional mindset, it's really the difference maker, isn't it? Between just flying a drone and being a true remote pilot in command at RPIC.
It absolutely is. And we have to start, actually, with that mindset piece because, a lot of new operators, maybe coming from the hobby side or just starting commercially, they kind of resist thinking of themselves as real pilots.
Oh, yeah, I hear that constantly. It's just a small drone, or I'm not flying a jumbo jet.
But the FAA doesn't see it that way. Not at all. If you have that Part 107 remote pilot certificate, the FAA certifies you as an airman, as a pilot. That's not just words. It's a legal status.
It comes with duties, responsibilities.
Exactly. The same expectation of rigor, of systematic thinking applies whether you're flying a tiny quadcopter or, a 747. You are the captain of that aircraft, period. And the rules demand you use this ADM framework.
Okay, and tied right into that is the confusion around what's commercial. People think, I didn't get paid for this flight, so it's recreational.
That's probably one of the most common and, frankly, dangerous misunderstandings. Commercial operation isn't just about cash changing hands for that flight. It's defined as flying in furtherance of a business.
In furtherance of. That's the key phrase.
That's the one. So the classic example, right? The farmer. If you fly your drone over your own fields to check crop health, look for irrigation issues, whatever, that's furthering your farming business. That's commercial. Even if nobody paid you specifically for that drone flight.
But if I just go out to the park and take some photos for fun, purely for my own enjoyment.
That's recreational. Purely pleasure, no business connection. The intent of that specific flight is what matters in any FAA investigation. If it benefits a business in any way, it falls under Part 107. All the rules apply.
Got it. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the stakes here. Why is operating safely and professionally so incredibly important right now, especially for the drone industry as a whole? When something goes wrong, it blows up in the news.
Because honestly, the media is often just waiting for an incident. They love the drone nearly hits plane story, even if it turns out later it wasn't a drone at all. Remember that big one near London? Huge headlines about a suspected drone strike on a passenger jet.
Yeah, I remember that.
Turns out, after investigation, it was probably something else entirely. Maybe a plastic bag, who knows. But the initial scary story, that sticks. That negative public perception lingers.
And that perception drives regulation, doesn't it? Fear leads to tighter rules.
Without a doubt. If the public constantly sees drones as threat spying, interfering with aircraft, crashing into things, Congress will act. We'll see more restrictive regulations that could stifle innovation and make legitimate operations much harder. So every single RPIC out there is basically an ambassador for the industry.
Every flight counts towards that public perception.
Exactly. Flying safely, professionally, compliantly. It counters that default negative view, keeps the public trust, and frankly keeps the regulatory environment workable for everyone.
Now, something else operators talk about is feeling like the FAA doesn't follow up when they report illegal flying. What's the reality there? What's the FAA's approach?
That's another common feeling, but it's not quite accurate. The FAA does investigate credible reports of illegal operations. It takes time, but they do follow up. Their philosophy, though, starts with education.
So not immediately jumping to fines and penalties.
Right. If someone makes an honest mistake, maybe they misunderstood a rule, the first step is usually education, helping them understand how to comply. It's a compliance philosophy, not just an enforcement one.
Lead with teaching, not punishing.
Precisely. The enforcement actions, the fines, certificate suspensions that comes when someone shows a pattern of non-compliance, deliberately ignores the rules, or refuses the educational outreach. That whole process, investigation, paperwork, legal review, it takes time. So from the outside, it might look like nothing's happening, but it's a methodical process aimed at improving safety overall.
Okay, this next one is huge. The airspace myth. I'll admit it, even I used to think, the FAA only really cared about the air above 400 feet because that's our ceiling under Part 107. Below that,
yeah,
maybe it's the property owner's space.
Oh, that is probably the most persistent myth out there, and it's just flat wrong. The FAA controls all navigable airspace in the U.S., right down to the blades of grass.
Down to the surface. No ambiguity.
Zero ambiguity. This confusion often traces back to a really old Supreme Court case, 1946, Cosby versus the U.S.
Yeah.
Mr. Cosby was a chicken farmer.
The chicken farmer case, yes.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Military planes were flying low over his farm, and it was disrupting his chickens, basically making his land unusable for its intended purpose. He sued, saying the government had effectively taken his land through these low flights.
So it was an eminent domain issue, a taking of property.
Exactly. The court ruled on the land use impact, saying the flights constituted a taking that required compensation. It was not a ruling about who owns the airspace itself, the principle stands. Mm-hmm. The FAA manages navigable airspace from the ground up. As a property owner, you don't own the air column above your land, only the immediate space needed for reasonable use of that land. Flying a drone 50 feet over someone's yard, that's FAA territory.
Crucial distinction. Okay, let's untangle some jargon. Aviation loves acronyms and specific terms. Exemption, waiver, authorization. People mix these up constantly, and it causes real problems, right?
Huge problems. Getting them straight is vital for compliance. Let's take them one by one. First, exemption. Think of this mostly as a historical thing now, like the old Section 333 exemptions.
Before Part 107 existed.
Right. An exemption was basically special permission to operate outside the existing rules because there were no drone-specific rules yet. It was a big deal, usually involved FAA headquarters, kind of a placeholder until Part 107 came along. You generally don't seek exemptions anymore for standard ops.
Okay, so exemptions are mostly history. Then there's the waiver. We still use those under Part 107.
We do. A waiver is your formal request to the FAA to not comply with a specific Part 107 rule. The classic examples are flying at night, which requires a waiver of the daylight only rule, or flying beyond visual line of sight, waiving the VLOS rule.
And getting one isn't easy. It requires proof.
A lot of proof.
Yeah.
You can't just ask nicely. You have to submit a detailed safety case showing how your operation, even without following that specific rule, achieves an equivalent level of safety. You need to outline your specific procedures, technology, crew training, risk mitigations.
Which is why it takes time, right? You can't just apply the day before a job.
Absolutely not. The FAA needs time to review that safety case thoroughly. We always tell people, plan on submitting waiver requests at least 90 days in advance. 90 days. And I promise to be careful, is not a mitigation plan.
Got it. 90 days for waivers. Okay, lastly, authorization. This is the one most Part 107 pilots deal with more regularly.
This is your bread and butter if you fly near airports. Authorization is simply getting permission from Air Traffic Control, ATC, to operate in a specific block of controlled airspace like Class B, C, D, or the surface areas of Class E. Critically, you're operating according to all the standard Part 107 rules.
So you're not asking to break a rule just to be allowed in that specific airspace.
Precisely. Authorization is not a waiver. It's just ATC saying, okay, you can fly in this section of our airspace up to this altitude during this time, following all normal Part 107 procedures.
And how do we get these? Can I just call the tower?
Technically, the rule just says authorization from ATC. And yeah, some pilots might have occasionally gotten a verbal okay from a tower controller in the past, but we strongly advise against relying on that.
Why? Seems simpler.
Because aviation runs on documentation. If something goes wrong, an incident occurs, and the FAA investigates, some guy in the tower said it was fine, hold zero water. You need it in writing. Digital authorization tied to your specific operation.
Which leads us perfectly to LANC.
Exactly. LANC, Low Altitude Authorization and Notification Capability, is the system built for this. It's designed for speed and efficiency for routine drone operations in controlled airspace. You use an approved app, request access to a specific grid on the map up to a certain altitude.
And it often comes back approved in seconds or minutes.
Near real time, in many cases. The system automatically checks against pre-approved ceilings for those map grids. If your request fits, boom, you get a digital authorization number sent right back to your device. That's your proof. LAANC is expanded constantly and aims to cover pretty much all controlled airspace where drones typically operate. It's a game changer for pre-flight planning.
Okay, we've navigated the regulatory maze. Now let's get to the absolute heart of professional piloting. ADM, aeronautical decision making. You said it's systematic risk assessment and stress management. How often are we actually doing ADM?
Every single second. It's not a box you check before flight and then forget about. ADM is a continuous mental process. It's happening during mission planning, during the pre-flight inspection, during launch, throughout the entire flight, during landing and recovery, and even in the post-flight debrief.
It's a constant state of awareness.
If you're not actively thinking through the ADM process, you're essentially just hoping things go well, relying on luck. And luck runs out.
The FAA really emphasizes that good judgment isn't just something you're born with, it's a skill.
Absolutely. Good judgment can be taught. It must be taught. There's that old saying, right? Experience is the worst teacher because it gives the test first and the lesson afterward.
Oh, true though.
The whole point of ADM training is to build that systematic judgment before the negative experience happens, before the crash, before the violation. You're trying to install better software in your brain, Because unlike our drones, we humans don't get easy firmware updates. We're kind of stuck with version 1.0.
Human 1.0. So we need to be aware of the built-in bugs. The FAA identifies 5 specific hazardous attitudes. These are common mental traps pilots fall into.
Yeah, these are really well-documented psychological pitfalls that directly impact judgment and increase risk. Recognizing them in yourself is the first step. The biggest one, especially for rule compliance, is probably anti-authority.
The don't tell me what to do attitude.
Exactly. This pilot thinks rules are for other people, that they know better. They resent procedures. The antidote here is stark but true. Rules are usually written in blood.
Meaning someone got hurt or worse before that rule existed.
Precisely. Aviation regulation is largely reactive. Procedures exist because not following them led to tragedy. So the antidote is, follow the rules. They're there to protect you and others. Compliance is a safety strategy.
Okay, what's next? The pilot who rushes.
That's impulsivity. The feeling of do something, anything right now. This often kicks in during an emergency or unexpected event. The antidote, slow down, take a breath, think.
Easier said than done sometimes.
For sure. But in almost every aviation situation, even critical ones, you have more time than you think. Maybe only seconds, but seconds are enough to evaluate options instead of just reacting blindly. Acting impulsively usually makes a bad situation worse.
Then there's the feeling that bad things only happen to other pilots.
Ah, yes. Invulnerability. It won't happen to me. This leads to cutting corners, skipping checklists, taking unnecessary risks because, hey, they're lucky, right? The antidote is simple statistics and humility. It can happen to you. Accidents happen to experienced pilots too. Don't gamble.
What about the pilot who's always trying to show off?
The macho attitude. I can do this. Watch this. Maybe pushing the weather limits, flying too close to obstacles, just trying to impress someone, the client, friends, maybe just themselves. The antidote is professionalism. Taking chances is foolish. Safe, smooth, predictable operations are the mark of a real pro, not unnecessary risk-taking. You have nothing to prove by being reckless.
And the last one, feeling overwhelmed.
Resignation. This is when things go wrong, maybe multiple things, and the pilot feels like, what's the use, I give up. They feel helpless. The antidote is remembering your role. You are the remote pilot in command. You are never helpless as long as the aircraft is still responding.
Aviate, navigate, communicate, keep flying the aircraft.
Always. Even if it's just minimizing damage or guiding it away from people during a forced landing, you maintain control and make decisions until the very end. Never give up command.
So those are the attitudes. But beyond those moments, there's the ongoing issue of stress. How does stress impact our decision-making as pilots?
Stress is a huge factor. We generally talk about two kinds. There's acute stress, that short-term, intense fight-or-flight response, like, uh-oh, a bird strike or a motor fails suddenly. It gets your adrenaline pumping.
Your body reacts immediately.
Right. And then there's chronic stress. This is the one that's really insidious, the one that creeps up on you. Financial worries, problems at home, maybe a sick family member, or even just the constant pressure of running a business, meeting deadlines, dealing with clients.
Why is that chronic simmering stress considered more dangerous for pilots?
Because it degrades your baseline. It wears down your mental reserves, your patience, your cognitive capacity over time. When you're chronically stressed, a small problem that you'd normally handle easily, maybe a low battery warning pops up a bit early, or you lose video link for a second, it suddenly feels like a major crisis.
You overreact.
You overreact, make impulsive decisions, or maybe you miss subtle cues because your brain is just overloaded. It significantly lowers your threshold for error and undermines that systematic ADM process.
So managing stress isn't just nice to have, it's a core flight safety function. How do we mitigate it? Using things like the I'm Safe checklist.
Exactly. I'm Safe is a personal pre-flight check, specifically for the pilot part of PAVE. It's mandatory self-assessment. Let's run through it. I is for illness. Are you sick? Even a common cold can impair judgment and reaction time.
Oh, it's huge. Medication?
Absolutely critical. Are you taking anything? Over-the-counter, prescription, supplements, many medications, even common ones like antihistamines, can cause drowsiness or affect coordination. You must check if they're safe for flight.
Is there a specific resource for that?
Yes, don't just rely on the bottle label. The FAA points towards resources often maintained by organizations like AOPA or specific aeromedical advisory services. Consulting the official FAA list of prohibited medications or using a tool like the AMAS database, Aerospace Medical Association Services, is best practice. If a medication affects your faculties, you are grounded, period.
Okay. S is for stress.
Be honest with yourself. Are you dealing with significant life stressors, acute or chronic? If that stress is impacting your ability to focus, you shouldn't fly.
For alcohol, the rules are clear here.
Very clear. 8 hours bottom of the throttle and a blood alcohol content below 0.04%. But critically, even if it's been more than 8 hours and you're below the VAC limit, if you're hungover, you are still impaired. Impaired means no flying.
F is for fatigue, another big one.
Massive. Fatigue is cumulative. Pulling an all-nighter before a mission, bad idea. Studies show fatigue can impair performance as much as alcohol. Get adequate rest. Don't push through exhaustion.
And finally, E is for emotion or eating.
Are you emotionally upset, dealing with anger, anxiety, grief? That compromises decision-making. And eating, did you skip breakfast? Low blood sugar impacts cognitive function. Your brain needs fuel to perform ADM effectively.
So if you fail any part of I'm Safe,
You don't fly. You fail the P for pilot check in PAVE. It's a personal no-go decision.
All right, that brings us squarely to PAV. The FAA mandates that pre-flight assessment under Section 107.49. It's not optional. PAVE is the structure for doing it right.
It is. It's the systematic way to scan for hazards before you even think about taking off. But before we jump into PAVE itself, let's quickly define two terms we'll use a lot. Hazard and risk. They aren't the same thing.
Okay, what's a hazard?
A hazard is the actual thing, the condition, the object, the circumstance that could cause a problem. It's the potential source of danger. Think. Strong winds, power lines, a crowd of people, a low battery, maybe even a confusing instruction from ATC. It's the raw threat.
And risk.
Risk is your assessment of that hazard. It combines two things: the likelihood that the hazard will actually cause an event and the severity of that event if it does happen. So power lines are always a hazard. The risk they pose depends on how close you plan to fly, the wind conditions, your drone stability, your piloting skill.
So risk is subjective based on the situation and the pilot.
It has subjective elements, yes. Which is why we need a systematic hazard identification tool like PAVE to make sure we don't overlook hazards just because we personally underestimate the risk. PAVE forces you to look at everything.
Let's do it then. PAVE, the pre-flight scan. P is for
P-pilot. We just covered this with I'm safe. Are you fit to fly? But it also includes, are you current? Proficient? Do you have the necessary knowledge for this specific flight? For example, if it's a night flight, have you completed the required night training under Section 107.29 recently? Are you comfortable and skilled with the specific drone you're using today?
Okay. A, aircraft. This is checking the machine itself.
Is it airworthy? That's the legal term from SOGM 107.15. Does it meet all requirements for safe operation? This means checking firmware. Is it up to date? Inspecting propellers. Any deep nicks, cracks, or damage means they need replacing. Batteries, are they charged? Healthy, not puffed? Weight and balance, are you within limits for the payload you're carrying?
And a big one now, remote ID.
Huge. Since March 16th, 2024, remote ID broadcast capability is mandatory for nearly all Part 107 operations. You must check that your drone is RID compliant and broadcasting correctly as part of your airworthiness check. If it's not, the aircraft isn't legal to fly under Part 107.
Seen it. V environment. Some people say venue. This is the where.
Yeah, the operating environment. This is a dense one you're looking at. Whether does it meet the Part 107 minimums? That's 3 statute miles visibility. And staying 500 feet below clouds and 2,000 feet horizontally from them.
Those are hard numbers.
Yeah.
Non-negotiable.
Absolutely. And then obstacles. Towers, buildings, trees, wires, especially wires. They're hard to see. Terrain. Will hills or buildings block your line of sight?
Airspace. Is it controlled? Do you need LANC? Did you get it? Restrictions. Check for TFRs, temporary flight restrictions, and NOTAMs notices to airmen. TFRs can pop up for VIP visits, emergencies like wildfires, or big events. NOTAMs might warn about crane operations near your site, or maybe GPS interference tests. You have to check current TFRs and NOTAMs before every flight.
What else under V?
Interference forces look for power substations, large antennas, things that could cause magnetic or radio frequency interference and mess with your compass or control link. And finally, people and vehicles. Where are they? Are they moving unpredictably? Do you need barriers or crew to manage them? Can you maintain clearance? Okay, that's a lot for V. Finally, E, external pressures. You mentioned this is often where things go wrong.
It's consistently identified as a major contributor to accidents and incidents. These are the non-operational pressures pushing you to maybe bend the rules or accept higher risk than you should.
Like the client breathing down your neck.
That's a classic one, client schedule pressure. Or maybe you drove 3 hours to the site that's the sunk cost fallacy, feeling like you have to fly because you invested time and effort. Ego can be in there too, wanting to get the shot no matter what.
So how do you fight that? It feels less tangible than checking a propeller.
It is less tangible, which makes it dangerous. The absolute best mitigation, the pro move, is to name the pressures out loud during your pre-flight briefing with your crew, or even just to yourself if you're flying solo.
Just acknowledging it reduces its power.
Significantly. Saying, okay, the client really wants this done by noon. That creates pressure to rush. We need to consciously stick to our procedures and not cut corners. By verbalizing it, you make it an objective factor to manage, not just a feeling pushing you around. It makes it easier to make the safe call, even if it means disappointing someone or losing the time invested.
So PAVE gives us that static snapshot before takeoff. But conditions change. Wind picks up, clouds roll in, people wander into the area. That's where the 3P loop comes in, right? For continuous in-flight risk management.
Exactly. Perceive, process, perform. Think of it as see, sort, solve. It's the dynamic ADM cycle you run constantly while the drone is in the air. It never stops until the prop stops spinning on the ground.
Let's break it down. Perceive. What are we perceiving?
You're actively scanning your entire situation, using your eyes, your instruments, information from your visual observer, if you have one, looking for changes from your PAVE assessment. Did the wind actually pick up beyond your personal limit? Is that battery draining faster than expected? Did a car just pull into your emergency landing zone? Is the lighting condition degrading your ability to maintain VLOS? You're comparing the real-time reality to the plan.
So if everything is going according to plan, the risk is stable.
You perceive that the situation matches the plan, the risk level is as assessed, and you continue monitoring. But the moment you perceive a change, a deviation, a new hazard,
you immediately shift to process.
Right. Now you have to think about that change. What does it mean? Assess the new risk level, likelihood, and severity. What are your options? Can you avoid the hazard? Reduce its impact? Do you need to pause the mission, maybe land and wait, relocate to a safer area? Or is the situation serious enough that you need to abort the flight entirely? This is where you decide on a strategy.
And you use the team model here to help choose.
Team comes into play heavily in the process stage. It helps structure your thinking about how to handle the new risk. We'll detail team in a sec. But once you've processed and picked a course of action,
then you perform.
You execute the plan. You implement the control you decided on. Maybe that's initiating an immediate landing. Maybe it's climbing to get over an unexpected obstacle. Maybe it's telling your VO to focus entirely on that group of people walking toward the flight path. You take the action.
And critically, the loop restarts.
Instantly. After you perform the action, you go right back to perceive. Did your action solve the problem? Did it create any new hazards? You constantly cycle. Perceive the situation. Process any changes. Perform the necessary action. then perceive again.
Okay, let's unpack that team model used in the process perform steps. TEAM, what are the choices?
Team gives you 4 broad categories of risk control strategies. Keys for transfer. Can you transfer the risk to someone or something else?
Like adding a visual observer.
That's a perfect example. You're transferring some of the visual scanning workload, reducing your own risk of losing sight, or coordinating closely with ATC transfers some risk by ensuring separation. Buying insurance transfers the financial risk, although never the safety responsibility.
Okay, E is for eliminate.
Can you get rid of the hazard entirely? If a pop-up TFR appears over your operating area, the only way to eliminate that risk is to land or stay out of the TFR zone until it expires. If a specific maneuver seems too risky under current conditions, eliminate it from the flight plan. If you remove the source of danger, the risk is gone.
A is for accept. Can we just accept risk?
You have to sometimes. Aviation always involves some level of risk. But you only accept risk when it's been reduced to the lowest possible level through other mitigations, and the benefits of the flight clearly outweigh the remaining low level of danger. Acceptance is often tied to having safety margins.
Like landing with plenty of battery left.
Exactly. You accept the very small residual risk of battery failure, but only because you've mitigated it by setting a high mandatory reserve, say, landing at 30% or 35%. You accept what's left after you've done everything else reasonable.
And finally, M is for mitigate. This seems like the most common one.
It is. Mitigate means you take action to reduce either the likelihood of the bad thing happening or the severity if it does happen, or both. Flying slower near obstacles mitigates risk. Increasing your altitude gives you more reaction time. Using strobe lights at night mitigates the risk of collision. Setting up a geofence mitigates the risk of flying outside your intended area. Most safety procedures are forms of mitigation.
It's interesting how our own psychology can fight against this logical 3P team process. You mentioned pilots are goal-oriented.
Very much so. And that can lead to dangerous traps. 2 big ones are get there itis, that fixation on completing the mission, getting the shot, reaching the destination no matter what warning signs pop up. And closely related is plan continuation bias.
Sticking to the original plan even when it's obviously falling apart.
Yeah. You've invested time and effort in plan A, so you resist changing course even when the weather deteriorates or the equipment acts up or the situation on the ground changes dramatically. You ignore the perceive step because you're locked onto the perform plan A step.
So real ADM requires the discipline to interrupt that bias.
That's the essence of it. The discipline to recognize the change, perceive, assess it honestly, process, and then make the necessary adjustment, perform. Even if that means delaying, diverting, or canceling the mission altogether, eliminate or mitigate. It's about letting the situation dictate the plan, not the other way around.
Let's make this concrete. Time for some real-world scenarios. Apply PAVE, then run the 3P loop using team.
Sounds good. These really show how ADM works or doesn't work under pressure.
Okay, scenario 1. The nicked prop. It's your first big commercial gig. You drove 3 hours to get there. Weather is perfect. During your pre-flight, PAVEA for aircraft, you spot a propeller nick that looks deeper than just a surface scratch. And oof, you realize you left your spare props back at the office?
Okay, PAVE hazard identification. The obvious hazard is the damaged prop, aircraft. Potential for failure in flight, also huge external pressure. E, first big job, long drive, sunk cost, client likely waiting, risk analysis. Severity of prop failure, catastrophic. Loss of aircraft, damage on the ground, potential injury, FAA investigation, ruined reputation, likelihood. Significantly increased by that deep nick. The risk is unacceptably high for a routine photo job.
Right. So you perceive the nick. How do you process this? What are the team options?
Okay, process. Team. Can we transfer the risk? No, not really applicable here. Can we eliminate it? Yes, by replacing the propeller. But we can't. We don't have a spare. Can we accept it? Absolutely not. The risk is too high. So can we mitigate it?
Now, a lot of people might think, I'll just file it down smooth. Is that a valid mitigation?
It's a potential mitigation, but a risky one. Filing might smooth the surface, but it doesn't fix any underlying structural weakness caused by the nick. If you did file it, the absolute minimum perform action would have to include a very careful, low-altitude test flight in a clear area to see how it behaves. But honestly, the safest perform action, the one that truly respects ADM and the airworthiness requirement at Section 107.1 PAVE, is to eliminate the flight.
Meaning you abort the mission, lose the job for the day.
Yes. You accept the financial hit and the client disappointment to ensure safety and compliance. You explain the situation, reschedule, and bring spare props next time. That's the professional tough decision.
Ouch. Okay, scenario 2, protest footage. A major news outlet hires you. Big money. They want live overhead shots of a large, possibly volatile protest downtown. You do not have a waiver to operate over people. The crowd is dense and unpredictable.
All right, PAVE hazard identification. This is loaded. V for environment. Dense, unpredictable crowds, potentially chaotic situation, maybe complex airspace nearby. Class B or D. A for aircraft, not approved for flight over people, lacks waiver or required category rating. E for external pressure, massive, huge paycheck, high-profile client, pressure to get dramatic footage. Risk analysis, severity of an incident, fly away into crowd, battery failure over crowd, maximum potential for injury, huge liability, likely certificate revocation, massive negative publicity for the whole industry, likelihood. Elevated due to potential RF interference in the city, unpredictable crowd movement, maybe even objects thrown. Risk is extreme.
You perceive the situation, the crowd size, the client's demands. How do you process and perform?
Processing this is quick. The risk is far too high without the proper waivers and likely a category-rated aircraft. The only responsible perform action using team is eliminate. You must decline the request to fly directly over the crowd.
Can you offer an alternative? Mitigate or transfer?
You could propose a mitigation. Fly from a safe lateral distance, staying well clear of the people, maybe from a nearby rooftop if possible. Or suggest they transfer the risk, use a news helicopter, or hire an operator who does have the specific over people waiver and equipment for that mission type. Yeah. But you absolutely cannot accept that mission as described. You have to be prepared to walk away from the money.
Okay. Scenario 3, the confrontation. You're flying completely legally, Class G airspace, following all rules. Suddenly, a local police officer walks up, maybe misunderstanding the law, and tells you a city ordinance prohibits flying drones over city parks and demands you land immediately.
Ugh, the classic jurisdiction confusion. PAVE hazard identification.
Initially, everything was fine. PAVE were all green. But now, a new immediate hazard has appeared. Distraction for the pilot, P stress, emotion, and external pressure from law enforcement. Risk analysis. The risk isn't primarily the legality federal law preempts local airspace ordinances, so you're likely legally correct. The operational risk is the severe distraction and potential for escalation while you're actively piloting an aircraft. Severity of losing focus is high.
You perceive the officer approaching, making demands, you know you're legal. Do you argue? Keep flying while explaining the law.
That's the ego trap, the anti-authority or macho response maybe. The absolute best ADM here, the safest perform action, is counterintuitive but crucial. Land the drone immediately and safely. You choose to accept a temporary delay and potential inconvenience.
Land first, talk second, even though you're right. Yes. Because trying to fly, manage the drone systems, monitor the airspace, and argue with law enforcement splits your attention dangerously. That distraction is the immediate high-consequence risk you need to eliminate. Secure the aircraft first. Then, calmly and professionally, you can have the conversation, show your Part 107 certificate, explain federal preemption if needed, be an ambassador, educate after the flight risk is removed. It also de-escalates the situation and prevents potential confiscation or worse.
Makes sense. Safety first, even over being right in the moment. Last one. Scenario 4. The RTH trap. You're cleared to film an airshow crowd line, flying parallel to it from a safe lateral distance. Your planned flight path takes you quite far down the line from where you launched.
Okay. PAVE hazard identification. PAV checks seem okay. V, environment, includes the crowd and the authorized operating area. A, aircraft, includes checking your systems. But the subtle hazard lies in the aircraft's system's behavior, specifically the return to home RTH function. Risk analysis. What happens if you lose signal or manually trigger RTH from the furthest point of your flight path? The default RTH behavior is often a straight line back to the launch point.
Which, in this case, would take it directly over the crowd line you were carefully avoiding.
Precisely. Severity. Catastrophic if RTH fails over the crowd. Likelihood? Low, but the potential consequence is unacceptable. You perceive this potential system vulnerability during planning or pre-flight. How do you process?
You need to change the system's default behavior or your setup.
Right. The process step identifies this. The team choice is mitigate. The perform action happens before launch. You must proactively adjust the RTH settings or your launch position. Maybe you set a custom RTH altitude that's extremely high. Better yet, you might need to move your launch home point to a location where a direct return path remains clear of the crowd. Or, if the software allows, program a specific RTH flight path with waypoints that route it safely around the sensitive area. You have to anticipate failure modes.
Great examples. Okay, let's broaden the scope slightly. Many operators work internationally, or at least near borders. How does this ADM framework apply when rules differ, say between the U.S. Part 107 and Canada Part 9?
That's a really important consideration for cross-border operations. The good news is the core safety principles, what we might call the safety spine, are very similar.
What stays the same?
Visual line of sight, VLOS, is the default requirement in both. Maximum altitude is generally 400 feet AGL, or 122 meters in Canada. You need digital airspace authorization near airports, LANC in the US, NAV drone in Canada. And a thorough pre-flight site assessment is mandatory. That's Section 107.49 in the US and CARS 901.27 site survey in Canada. They essentially mandate a PAVE-like process.
But there are differences, starting with the pilot certification itself.
Big difference here. The US has the single Part 107 certificate with recurrent online knowledge updates every 24 months. Canada has a two-tier system. Basic for low-risk ops and advanced for operations needing more privileges, like flying in controlled airspace or closer to people.
And getting that Canadian Advanced Certificate involves more.
Significantly more for the advanced. Besides the tougher knowledge exam, Canada requires you to pass an in-person flight review with a qualified examiner. It's a practical, hands-on test of your flying skills, emergency procedures, and site survey knowledge.
So Canada mandates practical skill demonstration for advanced ops, while the U.S. focuses on recurrent knowledge testing.
Correct. It implies a potentially higher bar for demonstrated practical proficiency under the Canadian advanced rules. U.S. operators often achieve this through rigorous internal company training and SOPs, but it's not a federal certification requirement like the Canadian Flight Review.
Okay, what's probably the most critical operational difference for, say, infrastructure inspection teams working in both countries?
There would have to be the rules for flying around structures, the inspection bubble. This requires really careful ADM for cross-border teams.
How do they differ?
The U.S. rule under Part 107 is pretty generous. You can fly up to 400 feet above the top of a structure as long as you remain within 400 feet laterally of it. Think big buildings, tall towers.
Okay, 400 above, 400 side. What about Canada?
Much tighter. Under Canada's Part 9, the limit is maximum 30 meters. That's only about 98 feet above the structure. And you must stay within 60 meters, about 197 feet laterally.
Wow, 98 feet above versus 400 feet above. That's a huge difference for inspecting something tall like a cell tower or wind turbine.
It's a massive operational constraint. So if you have a team working in both countries, their standard operating procedure, their personal minimum derived from ADM, must adopt the stricter Canadian limit, 30 meter above, 60 meter lateral, as their universal standard for structure inspections. Otherwise, they risk non-compliance the moment they cross the border north. Setting personal minimums to the most restrictive rule you operate under is key.
Good point. What about weather minimums?
Slightly different approaches here, too. The U.S., as we said, gives hard numbers. 3 statute miles visibility, 500 feet below clouds, 2,000 feet horizontal. Canada's Part 9X doesn't specify numeric cloud clearance or visibility minimums. It puts the onus on the pilot and any visual observer to maintain VLOS and operate safely given the prevailing conditions.
So, more subjective in Canada.
A bit more performance-based, yes. Which again, for consistency and safety, leads to a clear ADM-driven best practice.
Adopt the U.S. numeric minimums everywhere.
Exactly. Using 3 miles visibility and the 502,000 cloud clearance as your standard, regardless of whether you're in the U.S. or Canada, provides a solid, quantifiable safety baseline for your operations. If conditions are below that, your ADM should trigger a delay or cancellation.
Makes sense. How about night flying and remote ID?
Night ops. U.S. requires the specific night training recency, plus anti-collision lights visible for at least 3 statute miles. Canada requires position and anti-collision lights sufficient for the pilot VO to maintain awareness of the drone's location and orientation. Again, VLOS applies. Remote ID. Big difference currently. It's mandatory and enforced under Part 107 in the U.S. since March 2024. Canada does not yet have a national RID mandate.
So, U.S. drones need it, Canadian drones don't currently.
Correct. But if you're operating cross-border or just future-proofing, standardizing on RID-equipped aircraft makes sense.
And flying over people sounds complex everywhere.
It is, in both countries. Neither allows it without specific permissions or meeting stringent requirements. Both use performance-based approaches. The U.S. has its Category 1 to 4 system based on weight, impact energy testing, and FAA declarations of compliance. Canada uses RPA safety assurance declarations tied to specific drone models and operational procedures. The bottom line is, you can't just fly any small drone over people. You need specific authorization, documentation, and likely a specially certified aircraft.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground, from mindset to regulations to specific scenarios. Let's try to synthesize this. What's the core message you want listeners to take away?
It really comes back to that 80% number. Technology is great, drones are getting smarter, but human factors still dominate accident causes. ADM, PAV, and the 3P loop are the tools, the systems proven over decades in manned aviation that give you, the pilot, control over that 80%.
They allow the RPIC to actually fulfill that legal responsibility as the final authority for the flight, right? Section 107.19.
Precisely. It's not just about knowing the rules. It's about having a repeatable, systematic process for identifying hazards and managing risk in real time. Perceive, process, perform. It transforms you from someone just operating controls to a genuine pilot managing an aviation operation.
What strikes me, though, is that even with these systems, things aren't perfect. LANINC gives you legal permission but doesn't guarantee safety within that airspace. Rules differ drastically, like that structure bubble example. So just following the rules isn't always enough, is it?
That's a critical insight. Compliance is the floor, not the ceiling. The rules and systems provide the minimum standard, but true professional safety relies on the pilot's judgment exceeding those minimums when necessary.
Which leads us to our final challenge for you, the listener.
Yes, if you're really serious about safety, about being a professional RPIC, relying solely on the regulations isn't enough. You have to define your own limits.
So the challenge is this. Take some time right after listening and actually write down your personal minimums. Not just the legal minimums the FAA or Transport Canada sets, but your specific, non-negotiable tripwires.
Think about it. What wind speed are you comfortable flying your specific drone in, even if the manufacturer says it can handle more? If the legal visibility is 3 miles, maybe your personal minimum is 4 or 5 miles, especially in complex terrain. Will you adopt that stricter Canadian 30-meter structure bubble limit, even when flying in the U.S., just for consistency and an extra safety margin?
What about battery levels? If the drone can fly for 30 minutes, what's your mandatory bingo fuel level to initiate landing? 25%, 30%, 40%?
Writing these down, making them concrete before you face pressure in the field is incredibly powerful. It turns external rules into your own internal standards of mastery. It makes it much easier to say no to yourself or a client when a situation exceeds your predetermined limits, not just the legal ones.
That's fantastic, actionable takeaway. Define your red lines.
And if you want to dive even deeper into the theory behind ADM, PAVE, and 3P, the FAA offers excellent resources completely free online. Check out the FAA Risk Management Handbook and the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, the PHAK. They're the foundational texts.
Excellent resources. That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.